Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, August 1st, 2022. Time for another month. Let's just do the whole month all at once. So what would that be? That's like 20-something shows, 2 hours. All right, so 48 hours straight, more or less, and we would cover the whole month. And let's just not have any more news after that. That's one way of handling this stuff. Okay, yes, good morning. New month at hand, and big month for KITM. We have like 3 crew-related birthdays this month. Not until the end of the month, and they're all almost the same day, right? Isn't it the case? If I remember / forget this every year, but in late August, Armando and I actually have the same birthday, and Scott is the day after, which is pretty amazing. I mean, just in terms of the odds against that happening. Greg is going to move his birthday. We'll find some space for him at the end of the month as well. You're all invited to do the same. Why not? Why shouldn't we all have it this way? And, we'll go forward from there, see how things go. I missed most of the weekend. I hope there was no news because I didn't get to see it. I declared the end of the month the end of news for the time being, so that hopefully held steady. I didn't see much. I was pretty much on the go all weekend. And really, by about Wednesday afternoon, I was necessarily checked out. Very jam-packed end-of-the-week schedule, but quite a nice weekend. So I wouldn't say I'm well-rested, but I am removed from immediate knowledge of exactly what's happening moment-to-moment news-wise, and there shouldn't be too much. It being August, Congress being mostly wrapped up, I think. Just before their recess, we had some action heading into the weekend, Friday votes, and some parliamentary maneuvering, but I think that is all mostly untangled by now. But I've got a few stories set aside that will untangle a few of the things that might still be confusing. I did manage to keep up with some of that. Greg says he's got it all covered, so that's good news. And we'll proceed from there. What else? Let's see. What has happened over the weekend that I did take notice of? Well, let's see. There were a couple of stories, some timeless stories, if you will, of more states now moving to arm their teachers, despite the fact that there is a pretty established record of it not doing too much and probably in the end hurting more teachers than helping anybody else when it comes to that. But why would anybody look at the experience of other states? They'll totally do it right when they do it. I happen to have a similar story. We've gone through this with Utah in the past. Ohio now moving to arm its teachers. And all I can tell you is I predict more of the same. With most particularity, I would say, the easiest prediction to make is that all of the rules with which they assure parents that every safety precaution is being taken in order to make it safe for teachers to be armed in the classroom, they will all go out the window when teachers violate them, because the prevailing sentiment always is that it's safer to have a teacher with a gun, even if they keep making safety mistakes, so long as they don't actually shoot themselves. And if they do, well, then the teacher is at fault, and they either need to be fired, as well as being shot in the leg, or transferred to another school where they can do this again, or what have you. It's never a matter of simply saying, well, if you can't keep the gun safe, then you can't stay in the program. You're just not going to be allowed to do this anymore. They don't take things like that away from people. So, anyway, we've got that from Ohio, along with by the way, I guess I should also say exactly what you would expect if you've been paying attention to the news for a couple of months rather than just a minute or so at a time. You'll know that you've set up quite a contradiction for yourself, that Republicans are at the same time hailing teachers as the best of the best, the goodest of the good guys. I believe it is in this article that I have over the Ohio program. People saying, of course, as you know, the only person who can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and teachers are the ultimate good guys. Oh, wait, it's Tuesday? Teachers are the ultimate pedophiles. I'm sorry, I forgot. They're the absolute good guys and the absolute most evil guys at the same time. Why not throw a gun or two in there, and everything will surely go smoothly. There was another story, by the way, that I don't think I even put away, that barely has anything to do with anything, except for the fact that it was an armed university professor. I don't even know the particulars of the story, but in Texas, I believe, armed university professor, not in class, but somewhere else, and as you know, ultimate good guy, yada yada, something, gets in an argument at a bar. Something has happened. He is outside. He has shot and killed, maybe at random, an 18-year-old student. I don't think a student of his, but, you know.
Well, not anymore.
Right, yeah, that's all done now. That relationship is over, as you know. But just, you know, one of those, hey, arm the teachers things, because they're the ultimate good guys. They won't do anything weird or strange like the hundreds of thousands of people who have done things that are weird and strange with guns in the past, I don't know, year or two, if you don't want to look any further back than that. These things happen in gun world, and they move on, and we'll just not have that guy be a professor anymore, and we'll take care of the problem. It's not anything else. It was his being a professor that was the real problem.
Well, you know, not everybody graduates, so, you know, let's not go overboard
right,
about
you know,
this.
You can't be like expecting everybody. Yeah, it's awful. Everybody's disposable in the gun debate, as it turns out. So, all right, Greg Dworkin, you are here. I want to let you know that, and then do with it what you will.
So the school motto is fire or be fired, right?
Yes, right. Everybody fire.
And
So
and the other thing I want to know is, like, where does the money come from to arm the teachers? Are they expected to do that on their own? Or are you simply going to take it out of classroom supplies?
It's a good question.
I mean, it's not like
really
you're going to
matters.
raise the school budget or anything like that.
No, that won't be happening. I believe when it comes to the weapons itself, they're personal weapons. When it comes to the training, I believe
it's personal
the state
training.
Picks that up in many cases. But the way they do it, of course, is this is the truth of it. That a lot of states, when they have training, whether it's for teachers or anybody else, when the state is either requiring or allowing this kind of training, they very frequently write into the law that you have to hire an NRA certified instructor. So it's kind of a pipeline of money to who pays for it. Yeah, sometimes it's the state when it's the training, and they love to do it that way because it's
so are
direct
they increasing
transfer
the school
from
budget?
the.
I mean, the point is, where is the money coming from?
Oh, I'm sure it's
let's,
coming
let's
out of.
Let's be conservative about this. Let's be Pat Toomey looking at burn pits for veterans. You know, where's the money coming from?
True, it's not coming out of. It's probably not coming out of classroom budgets, but it may be coming out of sometimes administrative budgets. This is their big generosity. They'll pay for the training, but it's a direct transfer from the state to the NRA, which is kind of an amazing thing.
I think we should arm dairy farmers so we can have a legitimate guns versus butter discussion.
No one remembers that as being the formulation anymore. I wonder what they tell kids these days in economics classes. I mean, you have to mention that phrase so they know what you're talking about, but I imagine the kids are like, I don't understand. First of all, guns are free. They grow on trees. Second of all, butter, like, I don't even think they charge for that.
Well, you know, are you going to fund the Department of Defense or Health and Human Services? Because we don't have enough money for both.
And then the kids say, well, where's the butter in that?
Well, that's the Human Services part.
They don't understand that. What do you mean? Why is that butter?
Okay,
why isn't that guns?
Cross it out and put
should be
bacon,
Xboxes.
okay? Do you get it now?
Yeah. Well, I think they tell kids now,
that's
Xboxes
where the health part
or
well, although arguably, bacon is both health and human services.
That's true too. And sometimes,
and besides, it's delicious.
Made out of humans. I think I should have some dramatic music, but the only thing visible is trombone. There it is. Okay, never mind. We'll do the horror dramatic. We haven't done that one for a while. Look, things are crazy out there.
Right. So Pat Toomey is, forgive the pun, getting roasted over his burn pit discussions.
Yes.
Basically what happened is he went on the Sunday shows and admitted that the reason that things were held up is because, like, we're mad at the Democrats. There's really no other reason. And Jon Stewart just absolutely roasted him. And,
Well, all right.
the veterans groups do. Toomey said, no. I just wanted my amendment to pass. And Jon Stewart said, what Toomey's amendment wants to do is to make sure our sick and dying veterans have the pleasure our 9/11 first responders at Ground Zero had of having to come back to Washington hat in hand, riddled with cancer, and march through the halls begging for money. That's what
correct.
Pat Toomey's amendment is about.
Yes, that's a very good explanation for what he was actually after. He was pretending to be fiscally conservative, and he has spread this story that I saw just this morning repeated by a Republican operative in one of the tapes that ASIN was circulating. They've got the story that, they changed the bill on us, and they added $400 billion in unchecked spending to the bill. There was no money added to the bill. It's not an appropriations bill. There's no money in the bill. That's just an impossibility. It's an authorization bill. Did they authorize an additional $400 billion? They didn't even actually do that. I mean, if you want the actual technical explanation for it was, as what Jon Stewart was alluding to is that they said, should we make this money that we guarantee to veterans to take care of their health care what they call mandatory spending? And Republicans said, no, it's not mandatory to take care of our veterans now that we've promised them the money. They should have to come and ask for it annually and have it reauthorized and reappropriated each year. As John says, unplug yourself from the chemotherapy, drag yourself to Washington and say, please, will you continue the health care that you promised me? That's what Pat Toomey says is fiscally responsible. Everybody else says, we've got an ongoing obligation. You should set it aside, call it mandatory, and if you need to cut spending, cut it elsewhere.
Right. So here's how Politico Playbook puts it. Republicans get burned. Last week, Senate Republicans blocked the passage of the PACT Act, which would expand health care access to veterans exposed to burn pits. Their opposition, ostensibly because they wanted to vote on an amendment offered by Pat Toomey, but difficult to divorce from the broader context of Democrats' breakthrough on reconciliation, has spurred swift and widespread backlash with veterans and advocates for the bill. Of course, most famous Jon Stewart, torching the senators in viral condemnation and TV hits. Pat Toomey called Jon Stewart a pseudo-celebrity, and Stewart said, well, better than being a pseudo-senator.
Yeah, which at this point, he's a lame duck pseudo-senator at that.
Right. So Schumer expects to bring the bill back to the floor. This time it'll pass. We'll see what happens. The other thing, of course, speaking of fiscal responsibility, Dems full speed ahead on reconciliation.
Yeah.
This week, the bill that launched a whole lot of Joe Manchin Sunday show hits will be front and center. Hurdle number one, the parliamentarian. This is the bird bath. That's today or tomorrow or both, or I don't know, but soon.
It's true. I don't know either, but it happens.
Right, and hurdle two, it's unclear whether Sinema supports the bill. Of course she does. What she doesn't support is closing the loophole on taxes that keep rolling over, which benefits hedge funds and big corporations, which benefits Sinema. So that's clear. So on Sunday night, a senior Democrat told Playbook that Schumer told the caucus to plan to be available this coming weekend to finish the bill. Expectations are Sinema will vote yes on the bigger bill, whether or not she insists that the carried over loophole thingy gets stricken. Nobody cares.
Okay.
Democrats said, let her have whatever she wants, just as long as she votes for the bill.
Well, I guess so. I don't.
It's the Joe Manchin approach to negotiations.
Yeah. It's not fun to see things.
It's not fun. It's not great, but she's exposed, and in the end, it's still the biggest and most important climate bill ever. And there's just so many other good things in the bill. So what?
Okay. Well, then
I'm
not too worried.
Get things done. There's just no other way.
And I suppose if she makes some demands that are beyond the limits, they'll beat her up for it, and then we'll find out.
Well, Manchin had to back off. He got even in safe West Virginia. He got beaten up for that. So we'll see.
Good.
Now, the other thing that Politico Playbook covers is the other big story is, of course, tomorrow's primaries. And there's a lot of news in tomorrow's primaries. Number of significant races. Interestingly, they list Kansas first because Kansas has a post-Dobbs electoral test on abortion rights, constitutional amendment. That if it passes could give the Republican-dominated legislature the ability to push new abortion restrictions, because right now Kansas has abortion protection enshrined in the Constitution. So naturally, when you don't like it, you try to change it.
Yeah,
That's perfectly
okay.
legitimate
Fair
democracy
enough,
in
I
action.
guess.
I don't have a problem with that.
All right, then.
But, you have to really call out what they're doing. So it's a close race, and we'll see what happens.
That's interesting on so many fronts, including the one that you wouldn't have expected. Kansas to have a standing protection already enshrined in the Constitution. Well, that was...
Right. Here's what the Politico Playbook says about it. Interviews with more than 40 voters in populous Johnson County, Kansas, quoting the New York Times, this week showed that after the fall of Roe, see, nobody calls it Dobbs, Republicans no longer have a monopoly on fury, especially in states where abortion rights are clearly on the ballot, and particularly in battleground suburbs. So we'll see what happens. Tight expected vote. Early voting turnout is up 246% over the 2018 midterms. So if you don't think abortion's an issue, or if you look at stupid polls that say, abortion doesn't really motivate you, shut up.
Yeah, I have not seen anybody try to
that
claim
actually
that.
came out over the weekend. Stupidest poll ever.
Well,
it doesn't really motivate me. Well, thanks, guy.
we asked one guy. All right. Well, that would be unusual. It has to be I would imagine that most people could recognize that as an outlier poll right away, but okay.
Right. Okay. Arizona. On Sunday, Emerson College released its latest polling in the GOP gubernatorial primary, which I found awfully interesting. Awfully interesting.
Okay, got
Karen Taylor Robson is at 47% and Carrie Lake at 46%. Statistical dead heat.
They need another third woman named K something in there. Just,
Well,
in the
Mike
Republican
Pence and
primary.
Doug Ducey are supporting Taylor Robson. Former President Trump has endorsed Carrie Lake. Carrie Lake is a complete and certifiable nut job. So I presume she'll win because her support is more intense.
All right.
Just that's the way things work. On the other hand, it's interesting that she's not running away with it, as other polls suggested earlier.
47% is right on your tail.
47, 46. And she's on the 46 end.
Oh, well,
in the GOP
right
Senate primary, Trump endorsed Blake Masters, leads with 40%, an 18-point lead over his closest competition. So he'll be running against Mark Kelly. I presume he'll lose. So, interesting stuff there, but stuff to watch. Another Arizona primary, State Representative Mark Fincham, complete Trump-endorsed nut job, running for Secretary of State.
Yep, don't do that.
So, have to watch that one. In Missouri, Eric Reitens trying to stay out of jail for, all sorts of stuff that is not to be discussed on a family-oriented show like ours.
Yes.
Get your bleep horn ready.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm not using it, but you should just always have it ready.
That's usually right. Hey, okay. We got it. Now, curse. Go.
Eric Reitens tries to win over Missouri's GOP voters after scandals, says the Wall Street Journal.
Come on over.
Well, we'll see what happens. In Michigan, we have Tudor Dixon, backed by the DeVos family.
Tudor.
Who lately, like right before in Rosie Ruiz style, running out in front of the race and claiming you won. Donald Trump says, I'll endorse her too. And that means that the other people running, are really ticked off that Trump didn't endorse them. Here's a really interesting piece in the Detroit News, and in case it's behind a paywall, I cut out the interesting part. Michigan's undecided Republican voters search for a fighter, but also a winner. This is a very important theme. Okay. The reason that Trump may not do well and is fading in the GOP isn't because Trumpism is. What Republican voters are looking for is somebody who can beat the crap out of the Democrats. They just want a winner. They don't really care who it is. They're not that loyal to Trump. And this quote talking about one particular voter sort of, summarizes it.
One particular voter.
She went into the debate thinking she might vote for businessman Kevin Rinke of Bloomfield Township, but she left leaning toward real estate broker Ryan Kelly, the guy who's been indicted. Andrus says she likes Kelly's attitude and feistiness, but is concerned many voters will be turned off by the 4 misdemeanor charges he's facing tied to the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. We have to have somebody who's electable, she said. As much as I know what he did is right, Most people who are not politically active and knowledgeable just saw that he was arrested and the media's painted him with a bad brush. He's for most people an insurrectionist, certainly not for me, but for most people. And so there you have the Republican dilemma right there. They like Trump. They like everything he does. They like what he stands for, but they're afraid he's becoming unelectable because, the media. So they may support somebody else, but it isn't because they've decided what he did is wrong.
Yeah, look what you made me do. Interesting. So, yeah, your articles about all the wrong that they've done haven't convinced me that they're wrong. It's convincing me that they're right. What I'm afraid of is other people thinking they're wrong and not
You've
agreeing
convinced
with
me he can't win, so I'm
right.
not going to vote for him. Well, that's half the battle.
All right. That's good.
You got to get rid of those
vote.
people. All you got to do is then convince the people they do want can't win.
Yeah.
That's okay. If you can do it with one, you can do it with the other. I'll take on that challenge.
Yeah. I kind of like that approach. Sure, I know you love the guy. I mean, who wouldn't? But can he really win? You don't want to waste your vote, do you?
Yeah. All right. So then you have, let's see. In races for governor, says the New York Times, Democrats see a silver lining for Republicans' anemic fundraising, missteps by Donald Trump, and weak candidates could stand in the way of bigger state house gains in November. And that, of course, Pennsylvania and Delaware, of all places, Arizona. Carrie Lake wants to upend how Arizonans vote, how their votes are counted, says the Washington Post. We will not stand for another stolen election, she said to a cheering crowd. She is Elise Stefanik. I mean, they're the same person.
They are. Well, she's already out there claiming fraud, and there's no voting yet. Not even.
Yeah, but the point is, I really don't have any principles. I was sort of center left, center right. But then I decided this is the path for power, so I will do whatever is needed.
I mean, she probably took a look at her senator and said,
Right? We're already detecting some fraud, she said. I know none of you are shocked, and I'm hoping we have the sheriffs that'll do something about it. Basically, if I don't win, it's fraud.
Do they have weird sheriffs in Arizona?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Isn't that
the
where,
original weird sheriff,
What's Joe Arpaio came
from? Yes. And
if Lake wins on Tuesday and goes on to take the governorship, in this purple state, she's pledged to try to enact election-related policies that could fundamentally upend the way people vote. Her stances and comments alarm many current and former election officials and other more conventional Republicans. A longtime TV anchor has repeatedly said she doesn't recognize Joe Biden as the nation's legitimate president. Her most dramatic election-related proposals would eliminate machines that tabulate votes, where more than half of Arizona residents live, Maricopa County. They're tabulated by Dominion voting systems, and replace them with people to hand count millions of ballots, presumably handpicked by her.
Right.
So you handpick people to hand count ballots, and then all of a sudden, Viktor Orban is governor.
That would be a weird outcome. No machines whatsoever, and I assume that includes calculators. So voting this time around is everybody who's for Carrie Lake stand over here.
She wants to terminate voting by mail.
Great.
She wants one-day voting only.
All right.
She wants voter ID on all ballots, presumably both mail ballots and in person.
Yes.
And supports the auditing of election results already required by law. So I'll give her that one.
Okay. She's allowed to have that one because it's required by law?
It's basically she wants to make it impossible to vote. Only me and my friends get the vote.
Now, I will say that if you're behind in the polls, that is an unusual stance. Let's have less voting. You really are looking for more votes than the other person.
Right. And remember, traditionally, vote by mail is Republican. It's only recently, since the pandemic, that has become a Democratic thing.
Yes, and not even certain it still is, but it's becoming maybe just an oppositional defiance. People are voting by mail because they know that Republicans don't want them to. But.
And then there's Maryland, Republican nominee for Maryland Attorney General. I don't know if you're detecting a theme here.
Yes.
Hosted 9/11 conspiracy radio shows.
Good. That
the Republican Party's nominee for Maryland Attorney General hosted a series of 5 radio shows.
I've done more.
In 2006, devoted to arguing in support of 9/11 conspiracy theories. Michael Perutka, candidate best known for his ties to neo-Confederate organizations, made the remarks on The American View, a radio show he co-hosted in 2006. What happened on 9/11, I told you I had been doing some research, watching some videos. And I said, if the buildings in New York City, the World Trade Center buildings, came down by demolition, that's to say if there's evidence that something was present and preset over there, then the implications of that are massive. I've been doing reading. I've been doing studying. I guess he's been doing the research.
Yeah.
And I believe that to be very, very true.
This is an
I always
attorney.
wonder if folks like that do research or whether they just teach. Before suggesting the work was done by controlled explosive. The thing is that's so funny, of course, is that Rudy was mayor at the time.
Yes. Well, he did it. He super controlled it all.
Right. And I said that on Twitter, and people are yelling at me, oh, stop supporting conspiracy theories. Well, little irony and mocking, goes a long way on platforms like Twitter. The fact is that, what are you saying? Are you saying Rudy was responsible for this?
Yes.
Or that somehow it happened even under him while on his watch? What are you saying?
They snuck around him because he was distracted by his melting hair gel. I don't know.
Outgoing Maryland GOP Governor Larry Hogan called out Perutka on Sunday, saying these disgusting lies don't belong in our party. You need more Larry Hogans in the Republican Party, folks.
You need Hogan's heroes? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
All right, fine. We can all
Perutka
whistle.
even questioned if remains of the deceased were found at the Pentagon, suggesting they were killed elsewhere.
Sure.
This is like InfoWars. An InfoWars guy is running for Attorney General.
Yeah. Meanwhile, InfoWars is being sued into oblivion, so,
Well,
maybe that's what's
the
coming.
trial is going. They've already lost the trial. Now we're going to find out, first of all, whether or not Alex Jones' blatant attempts to go bankrupt are going to shield money from the jury compensating the victims.
Yeah, right.
And just how much the victims are going to be paid. The Sandy Hook family in particular, who's currently on trial in Texas in terms of how much they're going to be compensated, said simply, Alex Jones convinced 75 million people that it didn't happen. So we want $1 for injury and $1 for punishment for each. So we want 150 million. That's where the money comes from. That's where that figure comes from. Just $1, $2 per person.
Yeah, you wonder about where does a figure like that come from. I think that's an excellent explanation and shows just how much damage he really did. We're only asking for $1 per person that he did this to. The problem is, as you can see, 75 million people believe in this, and now they're running for Secretary of State and Attorney General in Maryland and everything else in between.
We'll get local in Virginia after the break.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. What were we saying again?
Well, we're talking about GOP nutcases.
Right.
And on the break, I said to you, I just always wonder if people like Elise Stefanik or Carrie Lake ever wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, I wonder if I've made some unfortunate life choices. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, this is the road and I got to follow it to the end. I don't know why, but it's the path to power. And, of course, I truly believe there are Republicans who are persuadable. There are conservative Republicans who don't like these people.
Larry Hogan is one.
Like Larry Hogan, for example. And so, it's always worth, dealing with them. But as for the hardcore rest of the MAGAs, I think, honestly, the only way to deal with them is to beat them at the polls.
Yes, not
win elections,
with polls.
Not with sticks, but with votes. And, it's very important that they lose. And so, we'll see what happens. You can't expect them to lose in Republican primaries because Republican primary voters in low turnout elections are nuts. That's not the point. The point is for them to lose in the fall. I
will point out there are a couple of good stories out there on that front, and we've done them in the past. A lot of school boards where the Republican folks, after the CRT freakout, have come out and said, we're going to crusade and win the school board on this, and they've straight across the board lost in their local elections. Some have been nominated, that is true, but there are places where there are occasionally places where Republicans say, this is embarrassing. I don't want this person representing us, even in a primary or even as a sacrificial lamb to an overwhelmingly popular Democrat. And that's great. We're glad for that.
So we're going to take it local. We're going to take it to Virginia because we love people in Virginia.
I'm here.
Congressman Bob Good is a Republican who represents Central Virginia. He says parents deserve to know what's happening at Virginia schools, and that's why he's calling for cameras in the classroom.
Oh, yeah. All right, this is the carryover from Youngkin's election.
Yeah, but still, I mean,
deserve to know.
CRT in the classroom. Those are cathode ray tubes. This is what this guy wants. I can't believe it. He's pro-CRT.
Every time we go to put something like that in the classroom, they say, no, we need to be learning fundamentals. All right, so we'll start learning fundamentals. No, now we need... Okay, so he's going to check on everybody, and someone's going to watch all the cameras.
This way you know that their gun training is going okay.
Yeah.
Because, there's infinite amounts of money to put into the school system. And so, we don't want to fund it on guns. Let the Virginia teachers buy their own guns. We want to put cameras in all of the schools, and we're going to pay people to review those tapes later.
We're not. That's the problem.
Where's that money coming from? You're still taking it away from school supplies and learning.
What happens if I catch it on camera? We've armed the teachers, but assured all the parents that the teachers will never reveal to the students or anyone else whether they have guns. And then the camera reveals that you can see a teacher's gun.
Leaving the gun in the bathroom.
Yeah, right. Go put it there.
Because we're going to put cameras in the bathrooms, too, because why not?
Right. Well, you got to make sure the right gender people are in those bathrooms.
Yeah, it's about sports.
Sure. It's really about, what did we start on this with? Oh, yes, $400 billion is being stolen from, they'll just throw another issue in there. All right, so cameras in the classroom who nobody's going to pay for, nobody's going to review, and it will only matter if it's reviewed if we find something we don't like about liberals. Great. Well, okay,
so,
that will come to nothing.
Next big story, this is from Business Insider. Washington, D.C. Republicans' next big play is to, quote, scare the hell out of Washington, end quote, by rewriting the Constitution.
Not the Constitution. Or they're going to call it the Constitution. They should add that extra syllable.
Got to go back to Schoolhouse Rock, There are such things as amendments, and you can always amend the Constitution. It's a living document with originalist...
Wait, no, it isn't. Yeah, that's interesting.
Originalist parts of it written in stone.
Yeah, except for the ones we change. They found Article 5.
And they're willing to play the long game to win. The conservative movement isn't done reshaping the Constitution. Basically, what they want to do is win at state level and then have a constitutional convention, then change everything. That's basically the plan. And it's spearheaded by Rick Santorum.
Well, he's the spearheaded Rick Santorum.
34 states, he says, if every Republican legislator votes for this, we have a constitutional convention. Then you can enshrine religion and get rid of separation of church and state.
Yes.
And you can write, we're not a democracy. Every time it says democracy anywhere, we'll take it out and put republic or theocracy in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a thing you can do. There still needs to be ratification. 3/4 of the states still need to ratify the thing. I did read about that, and I was sort of toying with the idea of whether it's better or worse to boycott such a convention. I'm not really sure. But
not everybody in the conservative constitutional convention movement believes such a gathering is imminent. It'll likely take years more work to reach their goal if they ever do.
Yeah.
And what we've learned is that people who spend years focusing on something often get stuff done. And people who say, it'll never happen, are generally wrong.
That is true. In the middle of a pandemic, sometimes a significant portion of the people who concentrate on nothing but the long term die on the way. But, yeah, you got to make sure that you don't want that ideas passed down to further generations. However, that is enshrined in the Constitution. So,
right. So Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, for those of you who aren't lawyers like me, provides two ways to amend the nation's organizing document. The most difficult but most dramatic is a way to alter American society's very foundation. The first is for a 2/3 majority to propose an amendment with 3/4 of the states ratifying it. Think ERA. And that's how all 27 of the current amendments of the Constitution were added. No American under 30 has experienced the nation amending the Constitution in his or her lifetime.
Right. And no American under 30 can be in the Senate. So how about that?
The second
does that
method,
mean?
never before accomplished,
Nothing.
involves 2/3 of the U.S. states to call a convention. The power to call for a convention belongs solely to state legislatures who would pass and ratify amendments without a governor's signature, Congress's intervention, or any input from the president. And according to the Supreme Court, you don't even have to have a majority in those states. You just have to agree with us.
What?
Because if you do it, we'll agree with you.
Oh.
Because those who have the gavel make the rules.
Maybe. I'm not certain I understand exactly what they're getting at with that one, but I'll read that one.
Well, if
later.
Santorum says, well, we're supposed to have 34 states, but we only have 23,
Yes.
Alito will say, well, good enough.
Oh,
We
that
know what
could
you
be.
meant.
Sure. I mean, you can always do that.
That's close enough. We agree.
I get
I'll allow it. Have his feet up on the desk with a big sombrero and say, I'll allow it.
Right. The first, maybe the second comment that Clarence Thomas ever makes in court. That sounds good to me. Let's go.
Anyway, if
give me
they
a
were
beer.
successful, however they do it, a constitutional convention led by conservatives could trigger sweeping changes to the Constitution.
Sweepy.
So, just keep an eye on it.
Okay. Yeah.
They want to gut federal environmental standards, nix nationwide education requirements, create high threshold for Washington, D.C. or a territory to earn statehood. Yeah. They want to make it difficult, if not impossible, for somebody to work for decades within the federal government, like, Tony Fauci, for example. Former President Donald Trump, close to announcing a campaign for his second term in office, would find much to love about this movement. Because he's argued that Article 2 gives him sweeping presidential powers akin to Richard Nixon's famous declaration that when the president does it, that means it's not illegal.
That's true.
And he also argued he could unilaterally end birthright citizenship. He can't. But, if you change the Constitution, you can do whatever.
I guess that's true. That is there. And everybody forgets that there even are articles beyond the third. But they're in there. They're just small, and we don't study them a lot because it doesn't happen a lot. But Fifth Article 5 is there. And they mentioned, by the way, that no one under 30 has ever seen the Constitution amended. And I would venture to say that most of the people over 30 have no idea that the Constitution was amended that time either. 27th Amendment, probably the lowest profile, low-key amendment ever passed, and that's because it actually was spread out over 200-plus years to ratify it, which is a little bit unusual. Prior to that, the last amendment was like 50 years ago, the 26th Amendment, allowing 18-year-olds to vote. All the 18-year-olds who voted for it are 150 now.
Right. Anyway, two last stories before I go. One, I thought I should catch back up with what's going on in Ukraine, which years ago we used to call the Ukraine, which was wrong.
And we covered every day and has now become background noise, which is wrong. So thank you.
So Mick Ryan, an retired Australian military guy, wrote back in May, this is on Twitter,
okay.
I examined Ukraine's military strategy in a thread that I informally called The Ukrainians Are Masters of 21st Century War. Today, an update.
All right.
I call it the strategy of corrosion. It is important we study the Ukrainian military strategy and how they fight. It offers important insights for the modernization of Western military force, many of whom remain mired in an intellectual quicksand of Cold War doctrines. During their invasion, Russia's military has been forced by the Ukrainians to continually reassess its strategic objectives. Russia's downgraded the political goals and the strategy for achieving them. The Ukrainians have fought and subverted Russian strategy. While political objectives shape how war is conducted and what battles are fought, so too do battles reshape political objectives. It's been the Ukrainian military strategy implemented with courage and discipline that's driven this. They've achieved this through the adoption of a simple military strategy called corrosion.
Really?
They embrace the corrosion of the Russian physical, moral, and intellectual capacity to fight and in the global information environment, and this strategy sees Ukraine attacking the Russians where they're weak, while also using some of their combat power to delay and frustrate combat forces. It extends beyond tactics and operations. It attacks strategy. British military historian and theorist Basil Liddell Hart described this as the indirect approach. Right?
Oh, okay.
The indirect approach can often work. I am reminded of a great strategic movie on how to fight, which is called
Fight Club.
No, it's called Enter the Dragon.
Oh, all right. Well, that was kind of like Fight Club in a way.
Right? And on his way to the island where the tournament is going to take place, Bruce Lee on the boat comes up against the guy who's just really like super obnoxious. Mm-hmm. And the guy says, I want to fight you right now. And Bruce Lee says, well, I don't want to. And the guy says, no, I want to fight. I want to know what your style is.
Okay.
And Bruce Lee says, my style? My style is fighting without fighting.
Uh-huh.
And the guy says, what do you mean? And Bruce Lee says, well, this is a very small boat. It's very crowded, not enough room. Why don't we go over to that island there, that little island that we're just passing, and we'll fight on the beach.
All right.
The guy says, all right, fine. And
Sounds
Bruce
normal.
Lee says, let's take that boat, that little boat, you and I will go to the island, and we'll go from there. So the obnoxious guy challenging him gets in the boat, and Bruce Lee just casts the boat off. And the guy is, just sitting in the boat saying, what are you doing? And Bruce Lee, says, fighting without fighting.
There's my
and the
style.
boat sinks, and the guy
the
has
boat
to swim
sank.
back to the ship. And,
How did that even happen?
That's the whole point.
I don't believe I remember that, but I do remember the movie.
Well,
existing.
it's in the master cut.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I'm not saying I'm an expert.
A lot
in
of
the
his
movie. Who
philosophy
knows?
was cut out of the movie, and
Oh.
he wanted it back in. He actually died right before the movie was released, but this is the master cut that was released years later, and it's
Oh.
just
So
got
in a
some
way,
wonderful philosophy in there about how to fight without fighting.
They had that,
So
he lost that
Basil
fight,
Liddell
though.
Hart calls this the indirect approach. He wrote how effective results in war have rarely been attained unless the approach has had such indirectness as to ensure the opponent's unreadiness to meet it. That's exactly what Bruce Lee did.
That sounds deep. Okay.
The Ukrainians had taken this advice to heart. They've attacked the weakest physical support systems of an army in the field, communications networks, logistics, supply routes, rear areas, artillery, senior commanders in their command posts.
Look out for those rear areas.
In the battle for Kiev and Kharkiv, the Ukrainians were able to fight the Russians to a standstill because they were able to penetrate Russian rear areas and destroy parts of logistics support. And in doing
That's
so,
so funny.
they had a significant impact on Russian morale. The Ukrainians therefore corroded the northern Russian expansion physically and morally from within and forced its ejection from Ukraine. So they completely got beat up north. They had less success in the south, in the Donbass, due to the alignment on the front line and the concentration of most Russian offensive capacity. The Ukrainians were drawn into an attrition fight for many weeks. They didn't want that. And that's a way of war the Russians embrace, one which the Ukrainians would have preferred to avoid. But the introduction of HIMARS, that is to say the long-range artillery from the U.S. and Western powers, changed the dynamic. It allowed the Ukrainians to realign the defensive operation in the east and adopt it to attack the Russian strength by targeting ammunition supply depot and artillery from a distance.
Yes.
Okay? So the Ukrainians are readopting the asymmetric conventional tactics they used so successfully early. That's the deep battle. And another key target is command and control nodes, or in other words, command posts with senior Russian commanders. That's why they keep knocking off generals.
Yeah,
the ability to rapidly target these and use HIMARS to inflict maximum destruction is vital to this, because beyond the physical, there's a psychological impact. Removing headquarters also removes important coordination nodes, breaking down force unity. Targeting soldiers and units degrades further their morale and cohesion. Remember, Russian units fight by top-down command, and when you take out the command, they literally don't know what to do.
Headquarters are full of heads.
Yeah. So the use of social media showing off Russian deficiencies, and I would add singing Bakhtyar songs, has magnified this moral corrosion. The corrosion in morale has resulted in declining battlefield discipline. The Ukrainians have also forced the Russians on a deeper form of intellectual corrosion. More broadly, the Russians are having to form volunteer battalions, which will not be as well equipped. In implementing their strategy of corrosion, Ukraine now sees the Russian army under pressure with insufficient reinforcements, not enough supplies, et cetera, et cetera. Ukraine largely has refused to fight how Russia wants to fight. It's developed and implemented its own military strategy. What might other nations learn from them? In short, a lot. And so he'll talk about that next.
All right.
But you know,
we have to wait for that
Ukraine's winning. It isn't just a stalemate. It looks like a stalemate. It's not a stalemate.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm glad that he got around to using the word attrition, because I was thinking the corrosion thing sounds kind of like the old, winning by attrition. But
No.
it's not,
The winning by attrition is Lincoln and fighting this out. We have more, so even
Yeah.
if we both lose a lot of people, in the end we win. That's attrition.
So, yeah, this is sort of
Corrosion is
fighting
I'm the
over
smaller
your weight.
army. I'm going to, just keep nibbling at the bigger army till the bigger army is the size of the smaller army.
Yeah, I don't know. It does have a lot of similarities, and it might be just what you're attacking. As war of attrition is head to head, I guess, hand to hand type combat.
It's head to head. So a
fighting
lot of people get killed on both sides. We just have more, so we
war
win.
of corrosion,
that's not good for the smaller side.
Yeah, the corrosion is sort of attrition of stuff rather than people.
Yeah.
Like
Let's do guerrilla
if you hit
tactics.
your supply lines, then the attrition doesn't work. You can't supply if the other side isn't supplied. They can't fight their war of attrition against you because they're too hungry to fight you one on one.
That's an old George Carlin routine.
Oh.
Well, in the Revolutionary War, let's set the rules before we start. British, you have to wear red and march in formation. And you colonists, you get to, wear whatever you want. And you get to hide behind rocks and trees.
That's that makes things even. And that's essentially what they've done here. We want to fight on the roads and use the roads to travel. And the other side's saying, well, there are roads, so we're a little reluctant, but I think we'll blow them up. Then what?
Yep.
And then we got to drive in the mud, and we have no tires.
And our final story for today comes from all places, The Hill. It's a piece by Andrew McCarthy, lovingly retweeted by Britt Hume.
Really?
Has the January 6th committee done its job? Maybe, if negating Trump was the goal. And it's a long screed about how the Democrats did everything wrong. They did impeachment wrong, and this is making up for it. It lacks legitimacy under the guise of a legislative purpose to get to the bottom of the riot. It's investigating whether Trump committed crimes. It's not what they're supposed to be doing, even though they've amassed a solid case, he admits.
Yeah.
But Trump's impeachability was already established. So we'll see what happens with the Justice Department, it says. And then goes on to say, we can and should condemn the Trump campaign Stop the Steal antics and Trump's urging of Vice President Pence and congressional Republicans to object. Nonetheless, in cost-benefit, be a grave error to charge this misconduct criminally, he says. You have to understand that when you're a Republican apologist, nothing the Democrats do is right. And there's got to be some reason that you disagree with the fact that it's obvious that your side really did the wrong thing.
Yeah, well... Britt Hume is among the least effective at that, so keep it up, Britt.
On the other hand, again, written by Andrew McCarthy, on the other hand, charges would be justified if the Justice Department could prove that Trump willfully abetted a violent attack on the Capitol as opposed to engaging in reckless speech.
Oh, well, then let's do that.
But with impeachment a non-starter and prosecution dubious, we return to the committee's objective to convince the nation that Trump is unfit. So they figure he figures that they figure that they can't win an election, therefore they have to disqualify Trump. So put aside impeachment and prosecution. Despite its manifest flaws, the January 6th committee has made great strides in its main objective, render Trump a spent political force. That's his conclusion. You really have to stretch it, but I want to give you an idea of how conservative thinking runs, sort of all through through all sorts of tangles to avoid admitting that, our side really did bad.
Well, I guess that's what he's doing. It's interesting. It now strikes me that he's fighting the other side of the Russia-Ukraine conflict here. He thinks he will fight a war of attrition with his big man, and we are fighting a war of corrosion.
Exactly right.
And undermining his ability to fight. So terrific.
Loses.
Yes. So sorry, Britt. But we knew he was pro-Russian from, I guess, the fact that he continues to fight for conservative causes. I don't think he can do one and the other. Can't be pro-Ukrainian and pro-Republican at the same time these days.
What Britt did is pull out that piece and then pull this quote, which he thought was worth the world knowing.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Contrary to the committee's hyperbole, Trump's half-baked schemes had no chance of success. Far from being pushed to the brink, our Constitution easily prevailed. Which is basically saying, look, the bank robbery went really poorly. You can't possibly think I committed a crime because, I got caught and we didn't do anything.
Right. It's a little odd thing to say. I mean, I know he's not caught up in this, but to say, well, the Constitution prevailed, and the story from earlier in the hour, trying to change the Constitution so they can prevail next time. But they're totally blameless. Okay, sure. No, we actually came quite close to losing it because everybody was saying, who cares what the Constitution says? I have people here who will hang you. And, constitutions find themselves in trouble when you resort to that sort of thing. And you should really be happy about it being prosecuted if you're a conservative. But what can you do? He's Brit Hume, not a conservative.
Right. And by the way, the Razzoni, loaded with grain, leaves Ukraine, says the news. First commercial ship to depart the war-torn country pretty much since the start of the invasion. Many hope this will help fix a looming global food security crisis. And again, I repeat, it's the Razzoni, not Ronzoni. Ronzoni made all the noodles when I was growing up.
Yes. Are they still
around? And so I think it should have been called the Ronzoni because that would be perfect.
Yeah.
But, it's a Ukrainian and not an Italian ship, so that's where it goes.
Well, okay, so what is it actually called now that I'm thinking?
The Razzoni.
The Razzoni. And isn't this amazing? Just how much grain do they grow in Ukraine? They're in a full-scale war, and everybody else is like, can you do your farming and send us some wheat? We need the food. That's pretty amazing. It's hard to farm when you're busy towing Russian submarines. Yeah, you're right. Your tractors are engaged elsewhere. But so maybe you go back to the old tools and harvest by hand because the tractors are pulling stolen Russian military equipment off the field and parading it for TikTok.
Pretty much. Anyway, that's what I got for today.
All right.
I don't know why, plenty. But even though there's an entire weekend's worth of news, Monday broadcasts always wind up being like shorter than Wednesday and Thursday.
Do you think? All right. Well, usually I guess Wednesday and Thursday.
For you, it's 2 hours. Doesn't
right.
matter. Yeah.
The same for me, but you forget all the things that you forgot. Oh yeah. There's a rush of activity on Monday. Big stories.
But for me, my 20-minute segment finishes early on Mondays.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fine. Well, if you like, you can stand by and we'll continue from here, or for that matter, it doesn't disturb anybody to make the hang up noise, but you do what you like and hang on. Who knows? Sometimes people should know when you hang on to disconnect during the break. Then I start getting notes as we go along. We pull other stories, all the other things that you thought about and didn't work into your segment start coming out in notes, which is just as good as any for us. Okay. Well, I'll carry it from here.
Well, if people forget what the hang-up sign sounds like, it sounds like this.
The click and the boop, that's the one. That's the one I was thinking of. Okay. Well, all right. It's no problem. I know there was a while where you were self-conscious about making that funny noise on here, but that's one of the sound effects that people have come to know and love about the show. The one that's missing these days is the Coke can opening in the background. I forgot. That's not happening anymore. As we're the production staff, we've cut the Coca-Cola budget for the production staff. No more Coca-Cola. This is a conscious decision to try to cut back on not only calories but caffeine. So there's an interesting chemistry experiment going on in the background each day. So there hasn't been a Coke can opening in a while, which you should all take note of. Of course, since the production staff, they've been working remotely 3 days a week, which is to say going back to the office 3 days a week. So the Coke cans were getting opened there for a while. Now we're slowly weaning the staff off the morning sugar and caffeine. So hopefully good things will happen. So far, so good. I mean, at the outset, it was either good things will happen, like losing weight and getting free of caffeine, or, possible mass murder or arson was an outcome for a while. But we got over the caffeine withdrawal pretty well so far. The chemical experiment being... This is actually a very interesting idea. I wonder, well, maybe I shouldn't shout it out. All the doctors will call in with different advice, but... Anyway, point is, chemistry experiments are slowly reducing the amount of caffeine. And it's a good thing, and it's a good idea to do. And for practicing Jews in the audience, you should be doing this as well. Start now, it being August. Spend August and September weaning yourself from your morning caffeine and lowering the amounts. Mix your coffee with decaf just a little bit and change the mix as you go along, and that will prevent a lot of problems during your Yom Kippur fast. It will help a great deal, and I used to get those piercing caffeine withdrawal headaches during the fast that just made it that much more difficult. Stomach ache, slight headache I can deal with, a little bit of fatigue, but that caffeine withdrawal, no good. So I would usually spend these months cutting back so that the fasting day is that much easier. So there you go. Also mixing in a little theological advice for you. It's not theological at all, but you get the idea. All right, where was I? I don't know. But I was going to tell you the story of... I will give you the story of the university professor who shot the 18-year-old girl so you can figure out on your own, as I did in passing, exactly what relationship there was, if any. But I don't think so. It wasn't. I will say this in case you were worried about this. I don't believe it's a case of a professor being armed in class, getting upset with the student and shooting and killing the student. Whether about something in class or an improper relationship outside of class, I believe there was no relationship and that the shooting was more or less random. But again, not everybody can just be given guns and all will be good. But that's the theory about what's going on. Maybe in that sense, it'd be a good idea then to jump over to the feature from the weekend from the New York Times. It's not, up to the minute political news, but everything's political. So I thought I would share this with you, or at least in part. But first, let me just peek over here. Greg, as promised, Greg is sending notes, and I want to see what we're up to. Oh, and it's almost break time anyway. So, economic news. Okay, very good. And I think it has to do with gas prices come down, because the next tweet is one's from Carl Quintanilla, who is a CBS or NBC News, CNBC and NBC News. Is he an economic reporter? Plus, the next one was from Gas Buddy, which is not even a person, but monitoring gas prices. Let's play the outro music and figure out what's going on. Carl says, Fundstrat? What is Fundstrat? Okay. The Cleveland Fed's inflation forecast now shows July CPI tracking to 0.27%. This is 3.24% annualized. This is garbage to me. The lowest rate since January of 2021, and a collapse from the 9 to 12% annualized rates seen in all of 2022. So inflation plummeting, plus gas prices, all good news. If that makes sense to you, congratulations. All right. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. There was a lot of econ jargon there. Inflation is down. That's what it means. I mean, I think it came through, but and I don't know what Fundstrat is. They've got it's somebody's Twitter handle. Thomas Lee, not Tommy Lee, the troubled rocker Tommy Lee. He says not the drummer, but I think that was the catchphrase for a while. Troubled rocker, whatever that was supposed to mean. But Thomas, who goes by Tom Lee, is from FSI Insight, a Fundstrat company, and he tweets as Fundstrat. So still don't know what that is, but it's clearly economic in nature, and there you go. And he tweets a thing which Carl Quintanilla wanted you to know, that the Cleveland Fed, not usually where we go for, hey, what's up with the national and international economy? Yes, the Fed, the Cleveland Fed, it's a legit Fed. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a member of the board of the Cleveland Fed and have people saying, yeah, but you're not really on the board of governors. I am. Where? I've never heard of you. I'm in the Cleveland Fed. Well, no wonder. I mean, don't we get all our news from the New York Fed and the big time overall Federal Reserve Board, the one Fed to rule them all or whatever? But there's Feds all over the place. And they're important people and they know what they're doing in many cases. So there you go. Cleveland Fed, and that's a heartland kind of a Fed. So this is not your coastal elites experiencing less inflation or saying so. No, and who would care if they did? It'd be like getting picante sauce made in New York City. Cleveland Fed's inflation forecast, maybe they got assigned the job of it. I don't know if that's how they divide it up. Cleveland, it's your turn to calculate inflation for July. July CPI, Consumer Price Index, tracking to 0.27%. that would be 3.24% annualized, but when has that ever been the case? I mean, I think it takes wild swings from month to month. The fact that you're calling Cleveland and asking them to calculate it tells you we have reason to believe that the monthly CPI is not the annualized CPI that other people have been saying, because we think big changes are afoot. Why even have annualized CPI? I don't know, for something else. I'm not an economist. But anyway, it's the lowest rate since January of 2021, which is a while ago, and we were having riots at the time, right? So watch out for that. A collapse in a good way from the 9 to 12% annualized rates seen in all of 2022. So the Republicans, of course, have been all set to run on the midterm elections, and they have outrageous inflation. Democrats, Biden, something, yargle-bargle, 12% inflation. And that would be scary, and you would be in trouble having to defend that because, as they always say, it's the economy, stupid. And sometimes it's a stupid economy on top of your being stupid or being referred to as stupid, which seems like a bad strategy just generally. But anyway, what if you ran a campaign based on there being 12% inflation when there was really 3% inflation? Everybody would say, you're a liar, we won't vote for you. But what if it was the same people who also said every major American city was burned to the ground by Black Lives Matter, and people believed that? Or aliens stole the vote, and pedophiles run the government, and, well, there is a bit of a problem with that. And 75 million people believe that thanks to Alex Jones. So now what? Well, okay. The news is reality is different, and that's great for those of us who live there in reality. Bad news for those of us who live in reality and see everybody else living in fantasy land and having the same vote that we do. Speaking of constitutional conventions, maybe that's something we could change there. The other tweet that he sent along was from Patrick Dehan. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And it says he's Gas Buddy Guy. So he's a real person. I don't know whether he calls himself Gas Buddy Guy because he is referencing the app that I have on my phone that tells you where the lowest prices for gas in your area are, or whether he developed that app or what. I don't know. He says today is the 45th straight day of falling gas prices. There's collapsing, there's falling, all sorts of calamities happening, but in a good way. The national average is now $4.21.5, I guess, cents per gallon. You know, it's a price, and they give it in 3 decimal points, which is in fact the way gas is priced, although that last decimal point is a 9. But okay, this is an average, so here we go. $4.215 per gallon. I don't know how you would read that out, but it is $4.21.5 per gallon. Down 82 cents per gallon, and that's funny too, is what's no longer on keyboards is the cents sign. And I wonder if kids even recognize that as a cent sign. I think they probably see it from word problems in elementary school math, but they took the cent thing, the C with the line through it, off. I bet there's a word for it too. Like Pilcrow, Silcrow. I wonder if there's a special word, not just dollar sign, cent sign. But so he has to use just a C there. And I think on some computers, and maybe Macs, if you hold down that C, you might get an option to use the cent thing. I'm sure there's a shift control something or other to make that. But people today, they probably don't even know what that is. So anyway, what was I telling you? Oh yes, gas prices down for 82 cents a gallon since June 16th. A total of 18 states, not enough to call a constitutional convention, but getting there. A total of 18 states have average gas prices at least $3.99 per gallon or less, which, by the way, is still a terrible price for gas, but it's less than it has been. Average for diesel, $5.30 per gallon and falling. And I always wondered about diesel. Just when I was a kid and they started making diesel cars more widely available, the idea was, well, there's this gas crisis and diesel is, I think, was diesel less expensive than gasoline at the time? Now diesel is considerably more expensive, but I guess there's still, I guess do you get better fuel efficiency per gallon out of diesel? Maybe that was the idea. Anyway, diesel smells bad and you shouldn't, use it, generally speaking. And now, of course, you can just switch to an electric car. Just poof, come up with thousands of extra dollars and switch to an electric car. But that is happening. I did see something somewhere the other day that said that we were at some critical, macroeconomic tipping point of adoption of electric vehicles. And I think that the big threshold was that 5%, seems like a small number, 5% of the cars either on the road or new car sales. I can't remember what the metric is. Probably differs depending on what you're measuring, but something like 5% of the cars being electric now was like a sign to the market where all hell was going to break loose in the market. Everybody was going to be rushing electric cars to market now that it was considered viable, breaking through the 5% thing. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And Teslas are everywhere on the roads of Northern Virginia. Not always the case everywhere, but they seem to be doing well. Can't tell. That's the leading indicator for me of electric vehicle breakthrough, because sometimes you can't tell with other makers whether those are electric vehicles or not. But the Teslas all are, so you know right away when you see them. I was just thinking yesterday about all the, we're spending a couple, I don't know what, billion dollars improving road projects around here, widening the roads and widening the commuter corridor roads. That of course means encroaching a little further on people's property, and we're bringing the roads closer to their homes. So I guess the compromise was to spend, I don't know what, building sound barrier walls along the way. I was actually driving with my dad last night, and he was saying, being from New Jersey and having been involved in New Jersey politics, he was wondering whether the decorative elements of the wall, the tops of these walls, have a sort of a cast cement, I don't know what you would call it, the design in it, like a frieze of sorts, but it's not hand carved. But anyway, decorative element, and I suppose they think that's very ritzy looking. But he was saying, being from New Jersey, it seems to me more likely that somebody with a relationship with the Appropriations Committee at the state legislature, makes those things and won, quote unquote, won the no bid contract to provide all whatever number of thousands of them that they would need for the top of all these wall sections, and made a mint instead of, say, just making it the same weird rock facing that they have. But somebody has a contract for the rock facing too. So anyway, I was just marveling at the fact that we were spending billions of dollars building these things, and it was taking years. And it's going to be complete in a couple of years. And by the time we finally complete these fabulous looking sound barriers, everyone will be driving silent electric cars, and we won't need the sound barriers anymore. But the point is, someone will be a millionaire. And it could be me, but I don't own any of those products or manufacturing plants for those products. All right, so that's the next thing to aim at. What was I going to tell you? Oh, yes, about training teachers to shoot people in class. That's really what it's all about. Not supposed to be the students, but it could be. If one of your students shows up with an AR-15, you might have to kill him, and that's what this is all about. Isn't this exciting for teachers? Trained, armed, and ready to teach kindergarten, says the headline in the New York Times. That way you eliminate the possibility of having to contemplate that it could be one of your students that you have to kill, because ordinarily kids, the ones who bring guns to school bring them accidentally in backpacks, or they find them in the parents' drawers and they put them in there, and they just want to show the other kids if they're in kindergarten. If they're in high school and they find AR-15s, sometimes they kill each other. Well, anyway, nothing could go wrong with this article, so we're going to be talking about teaching kindergarten. More school employees, it says, are carrying guns to defend against school shootings. In Ohio, a contentious new law requires no more than 24 hours of training. Because why hold things up? After all, requiring too much training is infringing on your Second Amendment rights. That's the current thinking among the gun extremists. There's illustrated by a photo of a teacher training to shoot this weapon. A teacher in Ohio felt a growing desperation after the shooting in Uvalde, Texas. "We just feel helpless," she said. That's the caption for this picture, and I guess this is her story, as reported by Sarah Mervosh. It's very long and detailed. I recommend it to you. I don't think we'll read all the way through it because there's so many other things to cover, but I want to give you a flavor of what's going on here. The date line here, Rittman, Ohio. So hello, Rittman, if you're out there. Mandy, M-A-N-D-I, with, I imagine, when it's handwritten, perhaps a heart dotting the I. Mandy, a kindergarten teacher in Ohio, had already done what she could to secure her classroom against a gunman. She positioned a bookcase by the doorway in case she needed a barricade. In an orange bucket, which I assume she means the color of the bucket as opposed to a bucket formerly containing oranges, she kept district-issued emergency supplies when she didn't have to pay for it. Gun is your own responsibility, I guess. Here are your emergency supplies to fight against an intruder, supplied by the district. Wasp spray to aim at an attacker, assuming that you're being attacked by a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and the odds are good. A tube sock. Free tube socks for all teachers to hold a heavy object and hurl at an assailant. I would add, by the way, I mean, I know why they do that, and I see the idea. They will often tell you, put your desk stapler in it. You can swing it and whack somebody or throw it throwing it is probably a bad use of it, But anyway, you might have to do that in desperation. And I'm wondering, a good thing to do training-wise, a sock in a bucket, you're not ready. You're not. You shouldn't have to assemble your defensive weapons at the last minute. And I know she's probably thinking, well, my plan is to put the stapler in it and hit him with the stapler until I train and then I get a gun. But for right now, it's to put the stapler in it. But I need the stapler until I'm being attacked. But then it may be too late. So, I really don't know what to tell you. They could give people things to put in the sock. All right, this is not the point of the article, but I guess really my point in reading the article is even when we try to prepare teachers to defend themselves, we don't really prepare teachers to defend themselves. And maybe that's largely because the ultimate aim was always to get teachers to carry guns. The sock was just, look, I don't know, here you go, have a sock, and you can put something heavy in it. Anyway. After 19 children and 2 teachers were killed in Uvalde, Texas, she, Mandy, felt a growing desperation. Her school is in an older building with no automatic locks on classroom doors and no police officer on campus. That shouldn't really have very much to do with the age of the building, but whatever. We just felt helpless, she said. It's not enough. And she feels helpless currently as well. She decided she needed something far more powerful, a 9mm pistol. So, she signed up for training that would allow her to carry a gun in school. Why a 9mm pistol? Probably because we'll find out that's what she had, or that's what was on sale, or I thought I could afford and handle at the same time. Signed up for training that would allow her to carry a gun in school. Like others in this article, she asked to be identified by her first name because of school district rules that restrict information about employees carrying firearms. So they're already up against the rules. You're not supposed to identify yourself as one carrying firearms, so you're talking to the newspaper and you need to identify yourself. And, she's staying within the bounds of the rules, but just one of the many ways you can fall short on the rules about which the authorities will ultimately not care, but why fail intentionally, right? So, okay, a decade ago, it was extremely rare for everyday school employees to carry guns, except in Utah. Today, after a seemingly endless series of mass shootings, the strategy has become a leading solution. Not really, but it is there. Promoted by Republicans and gun rights advocates who say that allowing teachers, principals, and superintendents to be armed gives schools a fighting chance in case of attack. Just to pause here to note that they don't make mention of the Texas version of this, and I assume elsewhere, which includes janitors for some reason. I mean, they're there, and presumably you trust them or else you wouldn't have hired them. But then I think people pulled away from the idea because they realized, oh, well, now you're talking about arming minorities, and we're not as crazy about that. But superintendents, they tend to be white. Let's give them the opportunity. It's just an observation. At least 29 states there, yes, still not enough for a convention now that I'm thinking about it, but keeping that number in mind. At least 29 states allow individuals other than police or security officials to carry guns on school grounds. Lunch ladies, for instance. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, as of 2018, the last year for which statistics were available, because after that, statistics got COVID and died and they weren't available anymore. Federal survey data estimated that 2.6% of public schools had armed faculty. The count has likely grown. Likely, we just don't know. In Florida, and that's one of the reasons that it's likely grown, more than 1,300 school staff members serve as armed guardians in 45 school districts out of 74 in the state, according to state officials. The program was created after a gunman killed 17 people at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida in 2018. Now, all the kids who were going to Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School at the time would like us to do something about guns instead, but look what they got from their Florida legislature. Rather than keeping guns out of people's hands and out of schools, let's put them in people's hands while they're in school. All right. In Texas, at least 402 school districts, about a third of the state, participate in a program that allows designated people, including school staff members, to be armed. And you see where this delicate language is going. You might be thinking, they won't go there, will they? They'll get there. So again, designated people, including school staff members, to be armed. According to the Texas Association of School Boards, another program, here's the one you're waiting for. This isn't the sentence. But another program which requires more training is used by a smaller number of districts. Participation is up in both since 2018, and in the weeks after the Uvalde shooting, lawmakers in Ohio made it easier for teachers and other school employees here, to carry guns. The strategy is fiercely opposed by Democrats, police groups, teachers' unions, and gun control advocates who say that concealed carry programs in schools, far from solving the problem, will only create more risk. Past polling has shown that a vast majority of teachers do not want to be armed. The law in Ohio has been especially contentious because it requires no more than 24 hours of training, along with 8 hours of recertification annually. That, to us, is just outrageous, said Michael Weinman, Director of Government Affairs for the Fraternal Order of Police in Ohio. What a hippie, right? The state's largest law enforcement organization. By comparison, state police or police officers in the state undergo more than 700 hours of training, which is really a bad comparison. You'll see why. And school resource officers, that is to say police assigned to campus, must complete an additional 40 hours. That's really the comparison we're looking for. Supporters say 24 hours is enough because while police training includes everything from traffic tickets to legal matters, school employees tightly focus on firearm proficiency and active shooter response. Of course, so did the Uvalde SWAT team, and fat lot of good it did them. But okay. Anyway, that's the big hole in the story, is the people that we've trained as in active shooter response don't even execute active shooter response. So, but I guess on the one hand, you got the Uvalde cops who have the opportunity to say, I'm not going in there. That's crazy. Versus the Uvalde teachers who might have said, I don't want to do this. This is crazy, but I'm already in here. So maybe they would have responded differently. But 24 hours of training, I don't think so. Anyway, studies on school employees carrying guns have been limited, and research so far has found little evidence that it's effective. There is also little evidence that school resource officers are broadly effective at preventing school shootings, which are statistically rare. I mean, that's going to make it difficult to have good stats anyway, but anecdotally, school employees carrying guns and, for that matter, school resource officers carrying guns, both have been pretty ineffective on the whole. Yet arming school employees is finding appeal, slight majorities among parents and adults in recent polls. Okay, sort of awkwardly put, but correct. Of the 5 deadliest school shootings on record, 4 in Newtown, Connecticut, Uvalde, Texas, Parkland, Florida, and Santa Fe, Texas, have happened in the last 10 years. It was this possibility that brought Mandy and 7 other educators to a gun range tucked amid the hayfields and farm roads of Rittman in northeast Ohio. Over the course of 3 days, Mandy practiced shooting, tying a tourniquet, like what to do if you accidentally shoot somebody. I mean, I say it that way. I mean, they're supposed to do that whether you shoot them or the shooter shoots them. It's good training, etc. But is it part of the 24 hours? I think all 24 should be about shooting. And then if you add tourniquets, great. What else? Responding to fast-paced active shooter drills. Her presence on the range, firing her pistol under the blazing sun, cut a contrast to the classroom where she dances to counting songs with 5-year-olds, dollops out shaving cream for sensory activities. Sounds dangerously like CRT, by the way. Teach them to add and subtract, damn it. And wallpapers her classroom with student artwork. That she was being trained at all spoke to the country's painful failure to stop mass shootings and to the heavy responsibilities piled onto teachers. Catching students up from the pandemic, handling mental health crises in children, navigating conflicts over the teaching of race and gender, and now, for some, defending their schools. That's right, the pedophiles are doing all of this. Mandy, in her 40s, arrived at the training with nervous anticipation. She had been a teacher for a dozen years and has children of her own. She wanted to be sure she could carry a gun safely around students. I get hugs all day long, she said. And there was the prospect of confronting an actual gunman. Could 3 days of training prepare her for the unthinkable? That's a good question, too. So far, by the way, I haven't gotten around to what I'm pretty sure I read in here, which was, I was alluding to before, that maybe Texas is thinking of, well, maybe there are certain circumstances in which some of the people carrying weapons in the schools don't have to be teachers. Couldn't they be students? Surely there are special never-miss marksmen among the students who we could totally trust at 18 years of age, let's say, to carry weapons around their friends. And that seems a little far-fetched and crazy. And I don't know if any state will really ultimately pass that. But, yeah, you can get elected as a state representative on that platform, in case you were wondering. All right. I do need to get at least through this part here. Time, it says, is all that matters. That's the section. The educators had come from Ohio and from as far as Oklahoma for a 26-hour course. Wow. An extra 2 hours. By Faster Saves Lives. Now, Faster is in all caps. So I think that stands for something. I don't know whether they bother to tell us, but Faster Saves Lives, a leading gun training program for school employees. Amazing that we have it, right along with the Hallmark card section for school shooting. It is run by the Buckeye Firearms Foundation, a Second Amendment organization that works alongside a major gun lobbying group in Ohio, and therefore gets paid with direct transfers from the state to take care of these things. The lobbying group, the Buckeye Firearms Association, supported the new state law for school employees and is getting paid under it. So what do you know? Amazing. Over the past decade, the foundation estimates it has spent more than $1 million training at least 2,600 educators. And what a way to put that, and really to go in for that. Shame on you, by the way, New York Times. Over the past decade, the foundation estimates it has spent over $1 million. Are we saying, maybe it's right. Maybe, it could be a quote-unquote charitable foundation to which gun nuts contribute, and they were spending that money. But now that Ohio has the program, they're going to start getting paid by the state. But I will remind you that under the Supreme Court precedent of Bob Jones University, a real thing and a real precedent, Bob Jones University the Bob Jones University case laid out that state subsidies can take any number of forms, including tax expenditures. So to the extent that the Buckeye Firearms Association and their foundation, which pays for this teacher training, is tax exempt, they are, of course, funded by the state or whatever the taxing authority is. I just want to point that out. Anyway, its approach aligns closely with an argument that has become a hallmark of the National Rifle Association and the gun lobby. The only good way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. In this view, teachers are the ultimate good guys, which is fantastic news for those who were derided as predatory pedophiles just last week. Well, at least you'll have guns on you next time a Republican accuses you of that. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I don't know, I keep saying I'm not going to read the whole entire article here, but I keep being compelled forward, which I guess is a hallmark of good writing. So congratulations in that respect to the writer, although I would like some more clarity on some of the finer points. Anyway, I just, as I said, it was important to sort of hear the weird contradiction, which I'm glad to have. Finally, some conservative-leaning Republican types on the record talking about how wonderful teachers are again. We trust them with our kids every day, said Jim Irvine, an airline pilot and longtime advocate for gun rights, who is president of the Buckeye Firearms Foundation and volunteers as a director with FASTER. So that's good. And I don't know, track that name. It's you might get confused. You might pick up another Jim Irvine from Ohio. But check the background. Make sure that Jim Irvine isn't spending the rest of the days lobbying with QAnon types for accusing the same teachers of being pedophiles. And that wouldn't surprise me at all. You know, just press the advantage wherever you have it. They're pedophiles and we got to get rid of them, and they're all teaching CRT. But if they are conservative enough to go along with a program that arms them in the classroom, then that's proof that they're not pedophiles. So therefore, we rehire those. It's, you know, they're going to be approaching this in a purely gimmitarian fashion, and there's no logicking them out of that. Their philosophy is that saving lives during school shootings is a matter of speed, and that schools cannot afford to wait for the police. And this makes a certain amount of sense, but I guess when you try and logically work it out, it's the waiting for the event where a lot of the trouble arises. But at Sandy Hook Elementary, of course, in Newtown, Connecticut in 2012, the first 911 call was made after about 5 minutes, and the first officers arrived at the school less than 4 minutes later. Still, of course, you know what happened there. In Parkland, Florida, the gunman killed 17 people in just under 6 minutes. Even in Uvalde, where the police had been criticized for waiting on site for more than an hour, the gunman is believed to have fired more than 100 rounds within the first 3 minutes, according to a state report. Time is all that matters, Mr. Irvine said. It's that simple. Of the 8 school employees being trained, Mandy was in some ways an anomaly. She was the only woman in the group. Several others were administrators, a superintendent, a principal, rather than teachers. In other ways, she was typical. Everyone had some comfort with guns. Mandy described hunting with her husband and shooting at a gun range on weekends. She said she had taken had taken other firearms classes, including concealed carry training, one of the prerequisites to participate in FASTER, which then, therefore, you could say probably self-selects for a certain type of teacher, and sometimes it makes sense, and you want somebody with some experience, but at the same time, it also means that the training is going entirely to people who are kind of sold on that agenda, which is maybe not great either. Because, maybe somebody with a more skeptical mind would approach the training differently and might say, maybe 24 hours isn't enough. Okay. Like others, she worked in a rural area where carrying guns in school is more common, in part because of longer response times by the police. And I think that probably rings true, but can I stop for just a second and remind you that what we're finding out here is guns in school are more common in rural areas than, say, urban areas. That's an interesting statement because, of course, most of the people who believe in this program would tell you in an instant that by no means do they agree that there's more commonly guns in rural schools than urban schools. But what they mean is officially carried. They think that the students are illegally carrying guns all the time because they're thugs and gangsters in urban schools, which don't even exist because they were burned to the ground by Black Lives Matter, and everybody knows that. Plus, they only teach CRT anyway. So, and it's all this hippie crap and kumbaya, not guns. So also that as well. And so something. Anyway, mishmash it all together. They are a bunch of hippies learning to sing about peace and love, but also vicious murderers, going to school in buildings that don't exist because they were burned down. And they definitely have more guns, even though this, which is all pro our program, says there's more guns in rural schools. But we don't believe that because it's in the New York Times. Plus pedophile something. Anyway, you see where we're going here? It makes so much sense. All right. So anyway, one group in the training from Oklahoma estimated the response time to its area was at least 22 minutes, which is, of course, true in schools, in banks, in, grain silos, everywhere. But whatever. Something. They're doing it. The last thing I want is for people to think we are just a bunch of gunslinging teachers who want an excuse to carry guns in schools, said Mark. Well, good news for you, or I guess in terms of response time, right? You want quick response. The last thing he wants is for people to think that, and yet it is the first thing that I think. So how do you like that for response time? He is a middle school teacher in Ohio, Mark is, who described measuring his school's hallway to determine how far he needed to learn to shoot, which is maybe, you'd think he probably thinks that's a practical approach. To me, you should learn to shoot from far away. That is true. However, I would caution you, if it had anything to do with the design of this program, and I am not a firearms trainer, I might say, though, just from learning about this stuff from observation, it's good to learn to shoot accurately at any distance. I would caution you about the idea of thinking, I'm trained in this. I should take the shot from all the way down the hallway, depending on how long it is, because, well, golly, so many things can go wrong with that. And I would hope that would be part of the training. Like, either the shot you want is as close as possible. I know you want to be away from a distance to stay safe, but just because you've shot a target from X distance, a paper target on a range with an iced tea next to you is not the same. And I know they do active shooter drills and everything. Maybe that's the thing to do and say, let me see you spin around the corner and take a shot as quickly as possible and see how accurate it is. And, you're probably pretty good, but maybe that's not the way you want to do it. Anyway, Mark is talking more here. I love my kids, he said. I'm going to do everything I can to keep them safe. I hope so. School districts typically require anonymity as a tactical and safety strategy so that would-be gunmen cannot plan around armed employees. While the school community may know someone on campus has a gun, employees and parents will not be told who. What were we just hearing from Greg earlier? which candidate for office was? Oh, yeah, Bob Good, right, the one who wants the cameras in the classroom, who, of course, has said parents and teachers and adults in the community, and not kids somehow, but parents they deserve the right to know what's going on in their kids' classroom. But one of the things that's going on is an exercise of Second Amendment rights, and you can't infringe on those by telling parents which teachers have the guns. Plus, also, even if you don't believe that, we don't want the gunmen to plan around armed teachers, so something, which makes a small amount of sense. But once again, they got to gimme-tarian their way around. Parents have the right to know. Well, what about this? Your teacher is carrying a handheld instant death machine among your kids every day. That we don't have the right to know. But what about the right to know that I believe that all teachers are pedophiles, and even though I have no particular evidence of that about any teacher, let alone this one, couldn't we fire them anyway? Because after all, they wanted to do a Kwanzaa activity once. So yes to that, and no to firing them for dropping their gun because, hey, mistakes happen. Okay, well, anyway, that makes the choice of candidates especially crucial. What does? The fact that you're not allowed to tell anybody that this person carries a gun near your child. So we got to be sure they're really good and they don't shoot themselves or toilets or anything like that. We don't always consider an individual that's like, hey, jumping up and down, said Malcolm Hines, an assistant superintendent in Suwannee County, Florida, where armed employees must pass a psychological screening, that's a good thought, and complete 144 hours of training. Sounds better. My spidery senses always go up on that if someone is too eager. Although, I don't know what too eager means, because going into, Rittman, Ohio, and standing out in the hot sun for a quickie 24-hour course is, maybe that's too eager. In Mandy's district, the superintendent said candidates must be approved by the school board. Now the school board knows. What if the shooter is on the school board, huh? I'm going to run for school board so I can plan my attack. I don't know. Dumber things have happened. I'm going to run for board of elections so I can steal the election for Trump. People are actually doing that, so what can I tell you? In addition to going through the FASTER training, they must meet annually with the sheriff's department and may be removed if their skills are not up to par, unless, of course, your sheriff is a constitutional sheriff who says, I won't enforce that law. So maybe that will happen, and maybe you'll find out about it, and maybe you won't. And maybe people with no training whatsoever will convince the constitutional sheriff that instead of 24 hours of training, I would prefer 0. And the Constitution says you can't infringe on my thing. Okay, fine. I have a cowboy hat, and so therefore that's the new Constitution. See how this works. At the FASTER program, much of the training focused on firearm proficiency. The group practiced shooting for hours, up close and far away, right-handed and left-handed. Small circular targets and life-size human silhouettes. I want to be perfect, Mandy said, noting that accuracy would be paramount if she ever needed to fire her gun in school. You bet. She's thinking right about that, except for the part of having the gun in school. Instructors offered safety and technical critiques, timed individual shots, and urged teachers and administrators to be assertive. All of it was aimed at one thing, stopping a gunman in the act. This is a very reactive way to think about gun violence prevention, said Sonali Rajan, an associate professor at Teachers College, Columbia University, who studies school violence. School gunmen are often teenagers in suicidal crisis. To intercept them beforehand, experts recommend mental health support, systems to identify children who may become threats, and tighter gun laws, including mandates on safe storage. It's one of the laws that has the best evidence, said Andrew R. Morrell, a lead gun policy researcher for the RAND Corporation, a nonpartisan think tank. In the face of an attack, one effective strategy is to lock classroom doors, unless you lock yourself in and the cops out. That's a bad strategy. More and more school districts have also hired school resource officers. Still, campus police have not reliably prevented mass violence. In one infamous example, a school resource officer present at the high school in Parkland stayed outside during the attack, just like the Uvalde cops. In Uvalde, the school district had added officers to its police force and doubled spending on security in recent years. If trained law enforcement officers couldn't stop that, what makes you think an ill-trained teacher or other school employee would be able to? Said Scott DeMauro, president of the Ohio Education Association, the state's largest teachers union, which opposed the new law. And I understand their opposition, although I will say, I might think, for instance, that a teacher in the classroom, trapped and with no way out, possibly herself shot and bleeding, might react differently than the Uvalde cops did. I do agree with that being the case. But, you're never going to be able to tell until it's too late whether, on balance, that turns out to be better. And, of course, my concern is always with the waiting. I understand that if you lay out the hypothetical, a shooter has shot their way in and locked themselves in there, the cops can't or won't go in. Wouldn't you rather have the teacher armed? Sure, at that moment, I guess I would rather have the teacher armed. And, of course, they won't be armed unless they're always armed. But the problem is that, in the training, and then you send them out there with the gun. And, in most cases, no gunman ever shows up in that teacher's classroom or that teacher's school building or even in that teacher's school district or even in that state, for that matter. It just doesn't happen during the tenure of the teacher and the armed preparation. But what does happen is that there's a loaded weapon in the classroom every day, every hour, under every circumstance, and things go wrong with that while you're waiting for the opportunity to become a superhero, which may never arrive. You might put the guns in the wrong place, the wrong hands. Anyway, a little bit more about this program and its training is available, but gosh, I do have some other things to cover. So, I don't know, I may return to it at some point. It's actually quite interesting. So many things to be picked apart here. A very important thing to do. We should be doing this all the time, except we should be doing it talking with state legislators who are considering this, except they don't want to listen, so it doesn't matter. So in some sense, it's a waste of time whether we do it or not. But I think you get the idea. I do recommend to you looking through the rest of it just so you get some idea of what's being done in Ohio and what's likely to be happening in your state somewhere soon, unless you have a Democratic majority in your state legislature. But even then, they may yet allow a program of training teachers to go through. It's a very popular thing and very easy to, pull the wool over people's eyes about this. All right, other things happening that deserve a little bit of attention. I saw this morning from the Detroit News, along with a tweet introducing the story. Oh, no, it's not going to let me do it because I guess they are paywalled. Well, good for them. They'll make a lot of money over there at the Detroit News. However, they could use some of that money to, I don't want to tip them off, but they need some IT people to block Pocket from being able to read this thing. But thank God they didn't. Allegedly here, sometimes Pocket pulls information from weird places and puts the wrong author on this thing, but it tells me Craig Mauger, M-A-U-G-E-R, may or may not be the author of this piece. Michigan Secretary of State here saying that attempts to block election certification will be futile, or futile, as we like to say when we're not talking to the Borg. Here's the thing. The reporter who tweeted this around was saying, this is our first test of election integrity. I don't know what. I forget what the tweet said. But I can find it because I think I retweeted it saying a second such test. Although they may have meant first test in Michigan. It is Craig Maurer, I guess is the author because he's the tweet author here, saying first major test of our election system since 2020 comes this week. With a little quote from his story, we are confident that the courts will swiftly enforce the law and that at the end of the day, the will of the people will stand. Benson, who I think is the Secretary of State in question here in Michigan, said of canvassing boards denying certification. Well, it will be, I guess, Michigan's first test since 2020, but not all of our first tests because it's already happening in Pennsylvania. Told you about that on Friday. Reading you coverage of the court hearing in which the state was attempting to force 3 Pennsylvania counties to redo and reissue the count of their Republican primary for Senate. Fayette, Lehigh, and Bucks, maybe, counties in Pennsylvania who had done this. Well, okay, now they're having the same thing in Michigan, or anticipating the same thing in Michigan, because Michigan is among the states having its primary election tomorrow, and I guess there's some threat from some counties, as there was in 2020, of independent contractor, rogue county board of elections members who would stand in the way of the certification of their county's results based on their personal interpretation, whether or not it agrees with court interpretations of what a legal vote is. Michigan's Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson says her office will not tolerate any effort to obstruct the certification of Tuesday's primary election based on partisan games or baseless lies. Any attempt to block the certification of our elections, regardless of the results, will be futile, Benson said during an interview with the Detroit News. We are confident that the courts will swiftly enforce the law, and at the end of the day, the will of the people will stand. Benson, a Democrat, made the comments just days before the first statewide vote since November 2020, when supporters of then-President Donald Trump attempted to overturn Michigan's results based on unproven claims of widespread fraud. About 5.5 million ballots were cast in Michigan's November 2020 presidential election. In the last gubernatorial primary, in August of 2018, about 2.1 million voters participated when there were contested Republican and Democratic primaries for governor. Benson said turnout in Tuesday's primary, which features a hotly contested 5-candidate GOP primary for governor, might generate somewhere from about 2 million to 2.5 million voters. As of July 25th, 589,813 absentee ballots had been returned statewide. We're ready for anything at this point, Benson said. And Benson said election officials from Wayne to Antrim counties, I don't know why that's the range, but I know Antrim had this problem before, but Wayne and Antrim have faced intense scrutiny since the November 2020 election, when Trump, a Republican, they remind you, lost Michigan to Democrat Joe Biden by 154,000 votes, or 3 percentage points. In the 20 months since that election, Republican Party leaders in the battleground state have replaced incumbent GOP members of county canvassing boards, the panels in charge of certifying results in multiple counties. The Detroit News first reported that trend in October. The changes, we don't know whether they're good or bad yet, have prompted some to worry that newly appointed members of canvassing boards who agree with Trump's claims of past election fraud could attempt to deny certification on the local level. Boards of county canvassers, which include 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, must complete their canvasses of the August primary by August 16th. Then the Board of State Canvassers, also comprised of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, is required to certify the statewide results by August 22nd. In 2020, one Republican member of the Board of State Canvassers, Norm Schinkel, real name apparently, abstained from certifying the statewide results, but the other Republican, Aaron Van Langeveld, cast the deciding vote, along with the 2 Democrats, to certify Biden's victory. Since then, Van Langeveld has been replaced on the board by state Republicans, and Schinkel resigned to run for the State House. So, we'll see what they got. The Secretary of State's office has been working to ensure canvassers know their legal responsibility to certify valid election results, said Benson, the state's top elections official. The state will respond quickly if there are illegal attempts not to certify an election, the secretary said. They have a code of conduct, is the next section here, and let's see what it is. Election officials in Michigan also expect a greater emphasis this year on poll workers across the state, as some Republicans have criticized how the 2020 vote was administered and decided to become involved in the process. In the last few months, nearly 6,000 people have volunteered to serve as poll workers through a state platform, Benson said Friday. Likewise, Detroit clerk Janice Winfrey said more than 3,000 poll workers have been trained and assigned to work in the August primary in the state's largest city. The Detroit Department of Elections had received a list of more than 800 Republicans who were interested in participating as poll workers in the primary. We've reached out to every last one of them, and as a result, we've trained and assigned more than 264 Republican poll workers, Winfrey said last week. In November of 2020, the then TCF Center, where Detroit's absentee ballots were counted, became hostile as Republicans and Democrats feuded over the handling of the election. at Detroit's Riverfront Convention Center, now called the Huntington Place. Winfrey's department plans to beef up security for poll workers as a result of the chaotic scene that unfolded on the day after the 2020 election when city workers were still counting absentee ballots. I think people know not to try the shenanigans that people tried in 2020 or they will be dealt with, Winfrey said. We'll see. This year, why not arm them? This year, Benson's office created and distributed a poll workers code of conduct following the disruptions that followed the 2020 elections. The code of conduct features 11 statements for poll workers to sign to affirm that they will abide by the vows. The promises include not expressing personal political opinions while present in a voting precinct and providing impartial treatment. Poll workers and election inspectors should at all times uphold and increase the public trust and confidence in Michigan's elections, reflect the highest degree of integrity, and demonstrate commitment to each principle of this code, the document says. Benson said she expects poll workers to follow the code of conduct, and if it's not followed, we are in touch with local and law enforcement, as well as local clerks, to ensure that any disruptions or illegal activity is dealt with swiftly so we can minimize any potential impact on the elections. Okay? I mean, I hope so, but it doesn't sound like they're willing to talk about what they're actually going to do. Last section here, bracing for challenges. Canton Township Clerk Michael Segrist said he's created a 4-page document about maintaining order on Election Day that he's going to give to individuals who oversee poll workers in his Wayne County municipality. Segrist said he's not sure the new code of conduct is required because workers have shared values, running a legitimate, free, and fair election. I think some people are serving as poll workers because they don't believe the system is secure, Segrist said. I have been honored to train them, and I'm excited for them to see the process Tuesday. I hope it works. This is exactly how the system should function. Let's make sure it functions first. Clerks across the state are also bracing for more partisan poll challengers on Tuesday than usual. In Midland County, a traditionally Republican area, County Clerk Ann Mannery said 4 different groups have said they're sending challengers to polling precincts. I don't know if that's good. In Midland, we don't normally see a lot of challengers here, Mannery said Saturday. Mannery, who has been managing elections in Midland County since 1997, said she has invited groups and voters concerned about election integrity to observe the vote counting process. I think that's the only way we're going to get people to believe in our system, to bring back the integrity, said Mannery, who was running for state house seat in a contested primary on Tuesday. People are not educated about how elections work, so the more you get them involved, the more they understand the process, and they realize that we do have very strong checks and balances in place, and that our elections are very secure here in Michigan. Well, that's the hope. I mean, I think we're putting a lot on the people they're inviting in. I mean, like if the 3%ers say we want to be among the group closely observing, and we also believe we have a Second Amendment right to come in there in body armor and AR-15s. Like, is that good? Or is the thinking, well, they'll see how secure and how much integrity we have in our election system, and then they'll lay down their weapons and walk out, or take their weapons out there and tell the other armed people, no, everything's on the up and up. Or they could seize the balloting machines and the ballots themselves and say, you're wrong, and I know you're wrong because I have a gun. And golly, I don't know how this is going to come out. Anyway, like I said, in Pennsylvania, they just had the same problem. And although we were able to untangle some of the claims that were being made by the various counties, they were all at bottom just unfounded. It all came down to the lawyers for the counties saying, we don't believe that the court decision ordering us to count undated ballots is valid because reasons, and so therefore we're not going to do it. We're not going to count, and we're not going to count until there's an appeal, and even if there is an appeal and we lose the appeal, we're still not going to count them because we ultimately just don't think it's right. And even if the Supreme Court of the United States says we're wrong, we might not count them because we're just not gonna. What's the point of following one court and not another? I don't know. But that's kind of where they stand. I thought it was fascinating the way they unraveled it. And, they're not completely crazy because they have the printed ballots and the instructions on the printed ballots to point to. And it says here that if it's undated, it doesn't count. But that's the danger of giving people like a little bit of education sometimes, or even worse, a little bit of a legal education. And I don't know if they would have had that little bit or not. And I guess it doesn't matter in this case because they're not abiding by the law. This written document says that you can't count these ballots if they don't have a handwritten date on them. Yes, but the courts have ruled that those instructions are not necessarily unconstitutional, but maybe. But at any rate, they're invalid. A decision has been made to use the same ballots but give out guidance that says you have to count this stuff. And they say, nuh-uh. Well, I mean, like that's the way court decisions are. But it's printed here. Yes, and the court says the printing is wrong. I mean, or not wrong, but I mean, laws are printed, but then they're invalidated by the courts. Do we say, yeah, but it still says it on this paper here? Well, not gimmitarians. Gimmitarians follow their own rules. All right. Anyway, we'll catch up with that. Tomorrow we can spend some time, I suppose, in lieu of a visit from Joan, we can talk a little bit about the procedural problems surrounding the PACT Act, and if you want, an unpacking of why it is that the new Republican line about this stuff, that there's $400 billion in new spending somehow snuck into the bill, is not true. For now, I can just tell you, as I did at the opening of the show, it's not an appropriations bill. Show me the $400 billion line. What's it being spent on? They can't even point to that. They just say, it'll be spent in the future on something. Yeah, well, how? It'll be authorized and appropriated, right? And we'll all get to vote on it? Yeah, well, that's too complicated for
From
most.
networksradio.com.
But I'll unravel it for you.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
A lot of people took a lot of cracks at this over the weekend, and some of them are pretty good, so I'll share them with you tomorrow. In the meantime, I do have to notify you that I believe that there is no West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy today. Well, some issues get in the way of today's show. Hopefully, a speedy return. But as always, interesting programming of some kind coming next here on Netroots Radio.